Colton Ray is here, 43 years old, and for the past 9 years, I've been at the helm of the Freight Optimization Division at Stratavance Freight Systems in Louisville. So when Bryce Langford uttered those words, "You're not a team player, Colton," in his sterile conference room, I knew precisely what was coming. Didn't flinch. I just sat there, watching him adjust his tie with that practiced smirk he'd worn since his corporate promotion 6 months back. The guy was 39, fresh out of some management boot camp, armed with enough buzzwords to choke a horse. "Collaboration is key in modern business," he went on, tapping his pen against his clipboard as if conducting an orchestra. "We need people who align with our culture." I'd heard this speech countless times before. Different words, same meaning. But the numbers on my desk painted a very different picture. A 28% reduction in processing time, $6.4 million in quarterly profits, and the highest client retention rate in company history. Bryce, however, wasn't interested in numbers. His focus was on control. The thing about working in logistics is that you learn to discern patterns. If you spot potential problems before they escalate into disasters, you notice delayed shipments, twitchy vendors, and when the entire operation begins to wobble on its foundation. And right then, sitting across from Bryce, I could see the pattern emerging. He wanted me gone, not because I was failing, but because I wasn't failing his way. I'd built something significant here, 9 years of cultivating relationships with drivers, vendors, and warehouse managers. These were people who called me directly when issues arose, who trusted my word over corporate policy. Bryce perceived that as a threat to his authority. He needed everyone to adhere to proper channels, follow procedures, and seek permission. "I understand your concern," I finally said. His eyebrows rose. He'd likely anticipated pushback, perhaps even anger. Instead, I smiled. "Teamwork is everything." That seemed to satisfy him. He leaned back in his chair, probably convinced he'd gotten through to me. That I'd learned my lesson about bypassing the chain of command, about making decisions without consulting his precious flowcharts. "I'm glad we're on the same page, Colton. Moving forward, I want to see more collaboration from your division, or transparency in your processes." "Absolutely," I affirmed. I left that meeting with 2 clear certainties. First, Bryce would find a reason to fire me within the month. Second, when he did, he'd learn a lesson about teamwork that isn't taught in management seminars. The true engine driving Stratavance wasn't corporate policy or rigid procedures. It was people. And those people had been observing this entire conversation unfold for months, building trust. Not bureaucracy began my tenure at Stratavance when the company was hemorrhaging money and losing contracts left and right. Back then, it was just me, 2 junior analysts, and a warehouse manager named Pete, who'd been there since the building opened. No fancy systems, no corporate oversight, just a group of individuals striving to move freight without incurring heavy losses. The initial year was brutal. I worked 16-hour days, slept in the office half the week, and assimilated every route, every vendor, every quirk within the system. When a shipment faced delays in Memphis, I personally drove there. When our biggest client threatened to leave, I camped out in their lobby until they granted me 5 minutes to explain our proposed solutions. Pete used to joke that I treated every package as if it contained my grandmother's ashes. Perhaps I did, but that's how you cultivate trust in this business, one delivery at a time. By year 3, we'd successfully turned the division around. Vendors began contacting us first when they had excess capacity. Clients renewed contracts without even exploring other options. Word spread that Stratavance genuinely cared about delivering results. That's when corporate took notice. They dispatched consultants, efficiency experts, and process improvement specialists. Each one sought to document our methods, transform them into a manual, and scale them across other divisions. I cooperated, answered their questions, and allowed them to shadow me for weeks. Yet they never truly grasped the fundamental secret. It wasn't the processes. It was the 11 p.m. phone call I received when a driver broke down outside Nashville. It was knowing which warehouse manager would bend the rules for an emergency shipment. It was the Christmas cards I received from clients who entrusted us with their most critical deliveries. The warning signs when Bryce received his promotion. I should have seen it coming. He'd come from corporate development, the type of individual who understood profit margins but had never loaded a truck. In his inaugural week, he scheduled individual meetings with every department head, branding them alignment sessions. Mine stretched for 3 hours. He wanted to understand why vendors contacted me directly instead of going through procurement, why drivers possessed my cell phone number, and why I made routing decisions without consulting the $2 million optimization software corporate had implemented. I attempted to explain presenting client satisfaction scores, retention numbers, and profit reports. He nodded, took notes, and inquired about standardization and scalability. The warning signs were initially subtle. He began mandating approval for decisions I'd been making autonomously for years, scheduled weekly progress reviews, and introduced new reporting requirements that consumed hours of my time. Last month, I discovered he'd been meeting with my team individually, questioning my management style, assessing their feelings of support, and probing for any concerns about current processes. That's when I knew he was building a case. The meeting itself occurred on a Friday morning in October. Bryce had scheduled it for 8 a.m., precisely when the overnight shift was concluding and the day crew was commencing prime time for maximum visibility. He'd meticulously prepared a presentation, slides on team dynamics, organizational efficiency, and cultural alignment, the whole 9 yards. "Colton, I've been reviewing your division's performance metrics." He began clicking through charts that somehow made our record-breaking quarter appear problematic. "While your numbers are strong, I'm concerned about integration with broader company initiatives." I allowed him to speak, observing him construct his argument with corporate buzzwords and cherry-pick data points. He skillfully managed to portray our strengths as weaknesses. Our direct vendor relationships became circumventing established procurement protocols, and our rapid response times were reframed as failure to follow proper authorization procedures. The conclusion was inescapable. "I think it's time we made some changes in leadership approach," he finally stated, meeting my gaze. "This isn't about your capabilities, Colton. It's about finding the right fit for our evolving organizational structure." There it was. 9 years of building something effective, and he was dismantling it because it didn't conform to his flowchart. I didn't argue. I didn't point out that his evolving organizational structure was code for micromanagement. I didn't mention that our biggest client had specifically requested to work only with my team. I didn't remind him that the last time corporate attempted to optimize our processes, we lost 3 major contracts in 2 months. Instead, I sat quietly, watching him fidget with his presentation remote. And something clicked into place. Bryce believed he was playing chess, strategically moving pieces around the board to consolidate his power. But this wasn't chess. It was logistics. And in logistics, everything is interconnected. Pull one thread, and you'd better comprehend how the entire network unravels. He wanted to see teamwork. Fine. He'd receive a master class in what transpires when a genuine team decides they're no longer playing along. I understand. Slowly standing up. "When do you want me to transition my responsibilities?" "End of next week would be ideal. That should allow us time to ensure a smooth handover of your accounts." I shook his hand, walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, and surveyed 9 years of relationships, systems, and trust that Bryce presumed he could simply reallocate among his preferred managers. Then I picked up my phone and made the first call. "Pete, it's Colton. Got a minute to talk?" By the time I departed the office that evening, I'd had 14 conversations, not about the meeting with Bryce, not about my firing, but simply checking in with people, ensuring they were all right, inquiring about their families, just being a team player. The unraveling Monday morning, Bryce convened an all-hands meeting for 10 a.m. He'd arranged it in the main conference room, the one with glass walls that allowed everyone in the building to observe what was happening inside. A shrewd move. for what he likely envisioned as a seamless transition announcement. I arrived 5 minutes early, found a seat in the back corner, and watched as my team filtered in. Marissa Keene from Client Success sat near the front, her expression unreadable. Pete leaned against the wall by the door, arms crossed. The two junior analysts, Jake and Sophie, whispered quietly to each other. Bryce commenced with pleasantries, thanked everyone for their hard work, mentioned some company-wide initiatives, and then built up to his grand announcement as if unveiling a new product line. As part of our ongoing organizational optimization, he declared, clicking to a slide displaying reorganization charts, we're implementing some leadership transitions to better align with corporate strategic objectives. He explained that I was pursuing new opportunities and that my responsibilities would be distributed among existing team members. He made it sound like a promotion for everyone, an opportunity to expand their skill sets and embrace new challenges. That's when Jake raised his hand. "It's going to handle the Henderson Group account?" he inquired. Henderson was our largest client, accounting for approximately 40% of our annual revenue. "Great question," Bryce replied, consulting his notes. "I'll be taking direct oversight of major accounts while we finalize the transition structure." Sophie spoke up next. "What about the vendor escalation protocols? Colton handles all the emergency routing decisions. We'll be implementing a new approval process that ensures proper oversight and documentation," Bryce asserted. I observed their facial expressions change. Jake and Sophie weren't merely asking random questions. They were guiding Bryce through a minefield, and he was stepping on every single explosive. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. By its conclusion, Bryce had committed to personally managing 17 different processes he'd never touched, before promised to maintain relationships with vendors who'd never heard his name, and assured everyone that transition documentation would be comprehensive and seamless. As people filed out, I caught Jake's eye. It gave me the slightest nod. An hour later, my computer access was revoked, standard procedure for departing employees. But Bryce had acted swiftly, perhaps too swiftly as it turned out, because he'd also revoked my access to the vendor portal, the client management system, and the emergency contact database. All the systems I'd used to manage day-to-day operations, systems that Jake and Sophie lacked administrative access to, and that Pete couldn't operate without supervision. By noon, the first problem emerged. A shipment of medical supplies destined for a hospital in Nashville had been delayed due to weather. Standard procedure involved rerouting through Memphis and expediting delivery with our priority partner, except the priority partner required authorization from a director-level employee, and their system only recognized my credentials. Jake attempted to call Bryce, but reached voicemail. Sophie tried the corporate help desk. He stated it would take 72 hours to update system permissions. The hospital called at 1 p.m., inquiring about their delivery status. At 1:30, Jake logged off the company network and did not log back in. At 2 p.m., Sophie sent an email to Human Resources with the subject line, "Resignation effective immediately." By 3 p.m., Pete was fielding calls from 3 different vendors who'd been trying to reach me about route changes, and he lacked the authority to approve their requests. At 4 p.m., Henderson Group called, asking why their expedited shipment was sitting in a warehouse in Memphis instead of being delivered to their distribution center. Bryce spent the remainder of the day in emergency meetings, attempting to piece together a response to problems he didn't comprehend with systems he'd never utilized. The beautiful part was how logical it all appeared on paper. No one was engaging in sabotage. Jake and Sophie had simply recognized they didn't want to work for a manager who'd fire the person who'd trained them. Pete was adhering to proper protocols by refusing to exceed his authority level. Everyone was being the perfect team player, following precisely the procedures Bryce had insisted were so crucial. And the entire operation was crumbling. The revelation of relationships Tuesday morning brought the true revelations. I was clearing out my office when Marissa Keene knocked on my doorframe. "Got a minute?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Marissa had been at Stradivance for 15 years. Longer than almost anyone except Pete. She'd navigated 3 corporate restructures, 2 ownership changes, and countless management transitions. Anyone understood the company's true workings? It was her. "I just got off a call with Henderson Group," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "They want to know who's handling their account now. Bryce is taking direct oversight of major accounts, right? Except they don't want to work with Bryce," she clarified. "Hey, want to work with you? Specifically you." She produced a thick folder of documents. "It's been going through our client contracts this morning. Want to guess how many of them have specific personnel clauses?" I knew where this was headed, but I let her continue. 17 major accounts. All of them specify that Colton Reyes or his designated representative must be the primary point of contact for logistics coordination. Henderson Group, Morrison Industries, Blackstone Distribution, the entire list. The personnel clauses had been my brainchild. Implemented about 5 years ago after a competitor attempted to poach our accounts by offering lower rates. Clients had balked at the idea of working with unknown account managers. So we'd formally incorporated relationship continuity into the contracts themselves. "There's more," Marissa continued. "I called our top 5 vendors this morning, casual check-ins, nothing official. 3 of them didn't even know you'd been let go. The other 2 asked me who they should be working with now for emergency authorizations." She slid another document across the desk. "This is our vendor agreement with Priority Express. Look at Section 12. I scanned the contract language. There it was, buried in the operational procedures. All expedited shipping authorizations must be approved by designated Stradivance personnel with established emergency contact protocols. How many vendors have similar language?" I inquired. "Most of them," she replied. "It was your idea, remember? You wanted to ensure we had dedicated emergency contacts, so shipments wouldn't get delayed by corporate bureaucracy." I did remember. We'd negotiated those clauses specifically to prevent situations where time-sensitive deliveries became bogged down in approval processes. The vendors had been happy to agree because it meant faster decisions and fewer delays. Now, those very clauses were creating the bureaucratic nightmare they'd been designed to prevent. "Bryce doesn't know about any of this, does he?" I asked. "He's learning fast." Marissa's expression was grim. "I had to explain to him this morning why we can't just reassign account management to whoever's available. The contracts don't work that way." "What did he say?" "He wants to renegotiate everything, standardize the language across all agreements, remove the personnel-specific clauses." I almost laughed. "That'll take months. And most of these clients will walk before they agree to work with random account managers." I know. Hell, Pete knows. But Bryce thinks it's just a matter of updating some paperwork. She stood up, collecting her documents. "There's something else you should know. I've been fielding calls from recruiters all morning. Word's getting out that you're available. And apparently half the logistics companies in Louisville are interested in hiring you. And 3 of them have asked specifically about bringing your team with you." She paused at the door. "Not telling you what to do, Colton, but if I were you, I'd return those calls. This company is about to learn what happens when you break the engine that makes the machine run." After she left, I sat there for a long time looking around my office. 9 years of building relationships, establishing trust, creating systems that actually worked. Bryce thought he could simply redistribute all of that among his preferred managers. He was about to learn otherwise. The fault lines deepened by Wednesday. The cracks had become fault lines. I was officially done at Stradivance, but I hadn't yet left the building. Technically, I was using my remaining vacation days to transition responsibilities, which primarily meant observing Bryce discover how many critical processes he didn't comprehend. The morning brought 3 crisis calls. A vendor in Atlanta required immediate authorization for a route change to avoid construction delays. A client in Memphis was threatening to cancel their contract if their priority shipment didn't arrive by 5 p.m. And our largest pharmaceutical account wanted to discuss continuity concerns after learning about management changes. Bryce had scheduled back-to-back meetings to address each situation. I watched through the glass conference room walls as he frantically took notes, made promises he couldn't keep, and gradually realized that resolving these problems demanded authority he didn't possess and relationships he'd never forged. At 11 a.m. My phone buzzed with a private number. Colton Reyes. This is Douglas Wright from Meridian Transport Group. I heard through the grapevine that you might be looking for new opportunities. Meridian Transport was Stratavance's biggest competitor in the regional larger operation. Better technology. But they'd never been able to cultivate the same client relationships we'd built. I'm listening, I said. We've got a VP position opening up, logistics operations. You'd be running a division about twice the size of what you're handling now, with full authority over vendor relationships and client management. Interested in a conversation? I might be. Great. Can you come in Friday? And Colton, if you've got good people at your current company who might be looking for a change. We're always interested in proven talent. I hung up and immediately called Jake. He'd been fielding his own recruitment calls since his resignation went public. How's the job search going? I asked. Good, really good actually. Turns out logistics analysts with emergency response experience are in high demand. Who knew? Any particular opportunities catch your interest? Funny you should ask. I just got a call from someone at Meridian Transport. They mentioned you might be joining their team. Nothing's official yet, right? But if something were to become official, hypothetically speaking, would you need an experienced analyst who knows your operational style? Hypothetically, yes. Similar conversations occurred with Sophie, with 2 of our senior planners, and with 3 warehouse supervisors who'd worked closely with my division. Nothing definite, no commitments made, just people exploring options. The full collapse by Thursday afternoon. Bryce was in full crisis mode. Henderson Group had formally requested a meeting to discuss account transition procedures. 2 smaller clients had called, inquiring about contract modifications. Priority Express had placed a hold on new route authorizations until they could establish proper contact protocols with Stratavance management. I spent my last official day writing transition documentation, detailed notes about vendor relationships, client preferences, emergency procedures, system access requirements, everything Bryce would need to keep the division running. Most of it was useless without the underlying relationships, but I wasn't about to tell him that. At 6 p.m., I cleared out the last of my personal items, left my company laptop and access cards on the desk, and walked out of Stratavance for the final time. Friday morning, I had breakfast with Douglas right at a downtown restaurant. By noon, I'd accepted the VP position at Meridian Transport. By 2 p.m., I'd called Jake, Sophie, and 4 other former Stratavance employees with job offers. By 5 p.m., 6 of them had accepted. The weekend passed quietly. I didn't call anyone. At Stratavance, didn't check company email, didn't monitor the situation. I didn't need to. Monday morning at 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Pete. You should probably check the news. The Louisville Business Journal's website featured the headline, Major Logistics Disruption Hits Stratavance as Key Personnel Depart. The article was professional, factual, and devastating. It outlined how 6 senior logistics personnel had resigned from Stratavance over the past week and accepted positions at Meridian Transport. It mentioned vendor relationship disruptions, client concerns about service continuity, and quoted an unnamed industry source stating the departures represented a significant brain drain for Stratavance's operations division. But the real damage wasn't in the newspaper. It was unfolding in conference rooms and client offices across Louisville. Henderson Group had terminated their contract that morning, citing concerns about operational stability. They'd signed with Meridian Transport an hour later, specifically requesting that their account be managed by my team. Morrison Industries followed by noon, then Blackstone Distribution by end of business. Stradivance had lost 4 major accounts, representing over $8 million in annual revenue. Priority Express sent a formal letter suspending their partnership pending resolution of administrative uncertainties in Stradivance's management structure. 2 other major vendors implemented similar holds. The beautiful part was how clean it all was. No bad-mouthing, no corporate espionage, no contract violations, just clients and vendors making rational business decisions based on their assessment of service reliability. Bryce spent the day in emergency meetings with corporate executives, attempting to explain how a routine personnel change had triggered a cascading operational failure. According to Pete, he'd prepared a presentation about temporary market adjustments and strategic realignment opportunities. Nobody was buying it by Tuesday. 3 more Stradivance employees had given notice. By Wednesday, the company had hired an emergency consulting firm to assess operational continuity. By Thursday, rumors were circulating that corporate was considering shutting down the Louisville facility entirely. Friday afternoon, Marissa called me. "Bryce is gone," she said without preamble. "Reassigned to some special project in corporate development. They're bringing in someone from the Atlanta office to run operations." Who? Someone who actually understands logistics, and they want to know if you'd be interested in coming back as a consultant to help stabilize vendor relationships. I almost laughed. "What did you tell them?" "You're probably busy." Building a new 3 months later, I was standing in my new office at Meridian Transport, looking out at the warehouse floor where my team was coordinating the largest single-day shipment in company history. Henderson Group's quarterly distribution run, executed flawlessly with the same people who'd made it work at Stradivance. Jake knocked on my doorframe. "Got a minute?" "There's someone here to see you." Pete walked in, looking older but more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He'd finally retired from Stradivance after 32 years, took his pension, and walked away from the chaos. "Heard you were hiring warehouse managers," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Always looking for experienced people. You interested? Maybe part-time consulting? Nothing too strenuous. I just want to work somewhere that makes sense again." I understood exactly what he meant. Building something that works with people you trust. Using systems that actually serve their purpose instead of serving bureaucracy. "When can you start?" "Monday." We shook hands and he headed out to tour the facility. Through my office window, I watched him stop to talk with Sophie and Jake, pointing out equipment, asking questions about workflow. Already figuring out how to make things run better, my phone buzzed with a message from Douglas Wright. "Stradivance just lost another major account to us. 3rd one this month." I deleted the message without responding. It wasn't about competition anymore. It wasn't about revenge or proving points. It was about building something worth building with people who understood what that meant. Some lessons are expensive. Bryce had learned that teams aren't just organizational charts and reporting structures. They're relationships built over years, tested under pressure, held together by trust. Break that trust, and everything else falls apart. The machine only runs when you respect the engine.